Hello, Icario tribe. It is Oliver here, and I'm just going to let you know that unfortunately we do not have a video component for this episode on YouTube, but we are uploading the full recording for your listening pleasure regardless. By the next episode, we will have video again, so you will be able to see me and Shane flap our gums at each other. Flap our gums at each other, in case you didn't understand the slang. So yes, enjoy the episode 007 on virtue and meaning. Welcome to the Icario podcast, where we help you break free from the human zoo, optimize your life, and become a force to be reckoned with your hosts, Ollie and the man himself,
Shane. And today we're talking about virtue and meaning. And this is which part is this? 6, I guess, of
this is part 6, yeah.
How to Get Your Shit Together podcast series. So, how to get your shit together. The idea is, if you want to live a better life and be a better human being, where do you start? That's what this series is about. And now we've talked about in previous episodes, talked about how to get your shit together on different dimensions of life, which is like physical, health, well-being, that kind of thing, and then mental and emotional and social and financial. And now we're talking about virtue and meaning. And here's why I think this is important to talk about. Because if you're early in the journey of getting your shit together, this is a lot of what we're going to be talking about here is kind of future stuff. Like, you'll get to that eventually. But it's important, and I want to talk about this here because there are aspects of this. There are aspects of making sure that you live a life that has a greater purpose in a way, right? That live a life of meaning and purpose. It's never too early to start taking steps in that direction. But also, I feel like a lot of self-development advice, self-help advice, this kind of stuff often stops short of this. So I see a lot of stuff in the self-development, personal development, improvement, whatever space that kind of just puts you on another treadmill. You know, it puts you on the treadmill of health and fitness, work out and get fit and then get even more fit. And then you have a 6-pack, you need an 8-pack now. It's just like, it never ends, it's just endless pursuit of more fitness. Mm-hmm. And the same, obviously, like with money and career, just make even more money, build a successful business, build an even more successful business, et cetera, invest, and you just accumulate money forever, And this is, I think, where you then go from, maybe you go from a treadmill that was worse for you to a treadmill that is better for you, that serves you better, at least to some extent, but you're still on a treadmill. Hmm. And like I say, I think a lot of advice kind of stops short of going into, okay, but what now? What now? If you have gotten your shit together, if you've sorted yourself out, you've maneuvered yourself into a better place in life, what now? And this is where virtue and meaning comes in. And for example, I think that ethics is something, that's what I mean by, it's one of the things I mean by virtue, right? It's like, do you live a life that is just for you, that's just, you just do things that you want to do and that serve you and so on? Or are you concerned with ethics? Are you concerned with living an ethical life? Which I think, ideally, everyone would be concerned with living an ethical life. This would be something that's on everyone's mind. But the problem is that the deeper you are in your own suffering, the less you have a capacity to care about and do something about things that are inside yourself. So yeah, maybe of course, we also see that, you hear about environmental problems and you hear about social injustice and you hear about corruption and you hear about all kinds of problems. And many people do care about these problems. But they're, on the one hand, yeah, if you're like broke and miserable and depressed and so on, then you don't have that much capacity to care about whatever the issue is. And also, you just don't have that much power. You don't have, and this brings us back to the topic of personal power, which we've talked about before. If you don't have a free minute in your day because you're working your minimum wage jobs trying to stay alive, if you don't have 2 pennies to rub together, like, what are you going to do? Even if you're the most caring person in the world and you're aware of issues and you want to do something about them, what are you going to do? You don't have enough personal power to do anything. And for me, this is this is one of the reasons, and this is kind of the answer to what next for all this self-development stuff. Raise your personal power, become a force to be reckoned with, and then actually do something instead of just being, instead of just retweeting the thing, retweeting to raise awareness for the problem. No, do something about the problem. Use your personal power to do something about the problem.
So in a sense, it's like start with yourself and radiate that outwards.
Exactly, yes.
Rather than starting out there when you've got so little personal power. And on that note, just made me think of this now. There's something that I very rarely save posts on Reddit, but I saw a post the other day on Reddit of a guy who was basically expressing on this subreddit unpopular opinions, and this guy was basically having a big rant about being forced to care about everything all the time, and it was a really heartfelt rant. He went off on one, and it was just the voice of a person who just got really tired of being subtly or not so subtly guilt tripped into not caring about various things. And it's like, look, I can barely afford groceries. I just broke up with my girlfriend 3 months ago. And he just was laying into it saying, listen, I'm doing my best, but I'm just one person. And I'm sick of being forced and guilt tripped into not caring about everything and made to feel bad about it. I'm just trying to keep my head above water.
Yeah.
And I saved it because I was like, I can feel the raw emotion in that. And that is an example in my mind of a person who has so many things within his own life that he's trying to solve, but then voices and communication from the outside and from online is basically saying, you should care about all these things. It's like, look, I'm doing my best here. Mm-hmm. And I truly empathized with him when I read that. That's why I saved it.
Yeah.
And it just seems to me like it's a person who's going through that same thing. Where if they could get a handle on all these things, I'm sure they would have the capacity to care about all that stuff, and they do it voluntarily without anyone telling them to.
Yeah.
It's like, look, if I had my shit firmly together in all these areas, then I'd have something to give. But right now, I'm on the back foot. I'm on the defensive in so many areas of my life. It's like I'm struggling in this way. I couldn't help if I wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. And I have empathy for that too. It is really difficult. It's really difficult to be shown this stuff all the time, to be shown all these problems all the time. But to be in a place where it's just like, what am I supposed to do? I can barely take care of myself. And the other aspect of this, which is a message that is really important to me, because I feel like this is often miscommunicated. I want to be very clear about this. In my experience with my own life and with people I've worked with, it is absolutely possible to do what in this context we have called getting your shit together, which is to say that even if you have been stuck in this situation for years where you have no personal power, you're suffering from all these things, and you feel overwhelmed, it can feel like, well, this is just how it is. This is how life is, and I have to deal with this somehow. But it is absolutely possible to get your shit sorted out. It's absolutely possible that the stuff that most people are suffering from is thoroughly solvable. And it's not just a matter of, you can get a little bit better, you can be in a little bit better position. You can completely solve a lot of the things you're suffering from. And you can get yourself in a position where you have far more ability to actually do something. And I think that's important to realize. It's important to realize that you don't have to put up with being in this situation and being stuck there.
Mm-hmm. And there's something that motivates me in terms of getting my own shit together. And it is the idea in my mind that I'm doing this not purely for myself. And so when I think about that, for example, I'll use one example. So I'm in the process at the moment of upgrading my dating life. Mm-hmm. And creating sort of like more dating abundance in my life, because it's an area in my life where I've always felt like I didn't really have any control or any influence. So I've been trying to sort that out. But it's not just for self-centered reasons. I often think about this when I feel like backsliding. I think because one day I want to have kids, right? And I want those kids to have a mother that is like, I want those kids to have a wonderful mother. So it's not just me getting a hot girlfriend. It's not just about that, although it's slightly about that, obviously. But it's about things I'm thinking about further down the line that involve other people. It's like my kids aren't even born yet, but I still love them to bits, even though they're not even around. They're not even real, but they're in my imagination. Mm-hmm. But it's like, look, I want to sort this problem out so that my kids have a wonderful, loving, caring human being of a mother. And it's a way of providing that motivation for myself to sort this out in a way that it's not just self-centered. And that's just one example. And health and fitness is another example too. It's like I want to be not just alive, I say my little brother's 9 years old.
Mhm.
I don't want to be alive and around for him, but I want to be my best, most energetic version when I'm around him and set a great example.
Yeah.
So these are just some things where you can use the promise of providing something to the greater community and the people in your life that sort of relates to something that you do for yourself.
Yeah, which is a really good point, because sometimes the best thing you can do is work on yourself. You care about other people, you care about these problems. Do the work on yourself to maneuver yourself into a position where you have a greater impact on these things instead of being stuck in your suffering, right? So yeah, that can also be a great motivator. But you have to believe that you can actually get out. You have to believe that you can do the work to get there. Now, in the previous episodes, we've always talked about like the top 3 practical, simple, high leverage things to do for each of the topics. On this one is a bit complicated. It's not as easy to just break it down into like do these 3 things.
Yeah, we're gonna solve the problem of human meaning and virtue.
Yeah,
and we're gonna solve the meaning of life in 3 top tips.
Yeah, 3 tips exactly. So yeah, but we are going to talk about like the 3 aspects that I think are the most important ones to build. And like I said before, this is something that you can aim to do this. And you have to determine for yourself, is this something that I want to and can start doing right now? Or is this something where I want to level myself up to the point where I can do that? And the first is simply freedom from self-concern. So freedom from self-concern, what I mean by self-concern is just all the stuff about me. And this is also a potential trap of self-development because it is about me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about how can I be happier, how can I be smarter, how can I be healthier, how can I be fitter, how can I get things that I want and experience things that I want and so on. And that is good, but again, to some extent,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a lot of people need more of that. Like, okay, you need to take care of yourself more, but it gets to a point where it's like, okay, now you're diving too deep into self-concern. And it's also something that I think is a huge problem in, this day and age, basically, that I think it's a bigger struggle than it's probably ever been before, because we have all these, we basically through social media. I think social media fuels self-concern like nothing ever fueled self-concern before.
Agreed.
Right, where you are constantly like presenting yourself and getting feedback on how well you're doing in a way, and seeing how other people present themselves. And I think it really just fuels much too much about me thinking. And this is the source of a lot of suffering. The more you are concerned with what do other people think of me, how am I appearing, how can I have more of this, how can I do better at this, the more of this I thing you have going on, the more you'll be suffering eventually. And so this is one of the things that working on self-development, if you're doing it in the kind of way we've been talking about, right, where you're not just chasing some other thing, but you're actually really trying to grow as a person, one of the side effects is that you will see that your self-concern reduces over time. So an example of this, for me, one of the strongest examples of this is when you develop self-acceptance, when you truly develop the sense that, and I mention this because I think that self-acceptance is a very widespread issue, where most people's default mode is that they feel like they're not really enough and that they're probably not worthy in some way. They're not really worthy of love or something like that,
Yeah.
And this is something that the more you actually develop real self-acceptance, the more you get to the point where it's like, no, there's no reason for me to be any less worthy than anyone else. There's no reason why I am any less acceptable as a person than anyone else. The more deeply you develop that, the more that voice of self-concern just kind of fades away. So it's like, oh, what do other people think of it? It doesn't matter what other people think of you. It's fine,
Yeah. Yeah, it's becomes a point when, I reached this point through my sort of self-development journey where I guess I reached a point like a dark night of the soul. Like I went into the abyss with it because I was like, and this was like a couple of years ago. It's like I was, taking cold showers, and I was meditating all the time, and I was going to the gym all the time, and I was like, I was driven, although I didn't know it at the time, I was driven by this deep sort of shame. I wasn't driven by a desire to make myself better. I was more just like chased by my shame more than anything else. And I'd say that would actually be the case for a hell of a lot of people. But I realized at a certain point, I asked myself the question, what is all this for? Why am I developing myself? Who else does it benefit except for me? I had to honestly ask myself the question in that way. And it was around that time when I joined a men's group, an online men's group, and we kept meeting. And we still meet every Saturday. And one of the things that the leader of the group, Chris, says is that, because it's all about developing healthy masculinity and stuff. And he said, a powerful man uses his power in the service of himself and others. Now, here's where I think that self-development kind of reaches a bit of a roadblock. It's like, myself, but what are you going to do with it? That's the question I don't see posed often in these circles. It's like, what do you do with that? You've developed yourself. Who else benefits from it? Because that's a real question.
Yeah.
Because I was doing all this stuff, but I didn't see it benefiting anyone. And there was this kind of undercurrent of I just felt a little bit selfish, like it wasn't benefiting anyone else.
There's an interesting aspect to this, right? I want to explore this a little further, because on the one hand, you have so you can be doing something like working on your fitness or trying to make more money or something like that, right? Anything self-development related. You can be doing that, and there are like different levels to it, because initially, like I would say, like the weakest, most toxic place to come from is if you're doing it because of external validation. So you're doing it because of pressure you feel from others, or because of an impression you want to make on others. So in other words, I want to be fit because I want other people to look at me and be like, oh, this guy's fit. I want other people to like me or admire me or something like that. That's why I'm doing it. And like you say, that usually comes from shame, right? I feel like I'm not enough. My body is ugly. And so I have to do all this work so that I can have other people tell me, no, you look good,
Yeah.
That's like the worst place to come from, the most kind of self-destructive, most toxic place to come from. And you can evolve from that to doing it for yourself. It's like I'm doing this not so that you like me, not so that you tell me I'm okay. I'm doing this because I want this, right? I want to develop myself for me. That's one step further, but again, it takes you a bit further, but it also then hits that limit of, okay, well, now what? That's what you were talking about. Okay, I'm just doing all this stuff for me. And then it becomes external again. It's like, well, in what way can I serve others? So instead of it from others to me, in what way does it go from me to others, right?
Yeah.
That's then the next step is, okay, how can I do this in a way that isn't just about me? And I think there's a step even beyond that, at least for some things, where you're doing the thing because you want to be doing the thing. So you're doing the thing for the sake of doing it. And it's not because you want this outcome, not because you want this person's approval, not because you feel like you have to, not because other people. It's just doing the thing because this is how I choose to spend my time on earth.
Yeah. And I think a simple question that helped me, and I think I saw this on someone's Facebook post at some point, was what would I do? How would I spend my time, and what would I do if no one could see it?
That's great. Yeah.
Or it's like, would I do this would I still do this if nobody saw?
Yeah.
If literally no other eyes, no one validated this at all, not another human being on the planet knew that I was engaging in this activity, would I do it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people that engage in this crazy ass self-development project, it's like, all right, with no Facebook, no Instagram, no nothing, you can't even tell anyone about it. And if you're in the gym and what have you, you're in there alone.
Yeah.
Would you still go? I think you could trim off a hell of a lot of things. And I think it's a really good question to ask. And you reach some interesting conclusions about what you're actually up to.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I like it. All right, so that's the idea that in general, and I think that's something that I would just, as a more practical kind of thing, I would encourage anyone on the pursuit of self-development to keep an eye out for that and look at how much self-concern is going on, like how much of my mind space is taken up by self-concern, and can I step beyond that, right? Can I find ways to lessen that? And again, like the most direct intervention I know of is to develop self-acceptance, and to develop self-acceptance via writing. You write about the things that are the causes or the stories you tell yourself as to why you're not enough. And this is also something, we'd probably make a separate piece of content all about how to do that, because that we could go pretty deep on that. But that's the idea of self-concern. The second thing that I think is a very, and this is a more practical thing you can do to kind of step into this virtue and meaning phase of development, is to think about what can you do to empower others. So not only, because for me this goes a step beyond serving others, which is obviously a very noble thing to do, like you say, with your family, or in your case with your future family, right? It's like you are thinking about, how do I serve these people? And I think family is the perfect example of that. I think anyone who starts a family has a strong experience of that, where it's like, oh, suddenly it's not just about me anymore. How do I serve and help these people? And again, a step beyond that is, how do I empower others? Now, I can talk about this a bit from my experience in entrepreneurship, because I started as a solopreneur. I did various like business projects just by myself. And then I started working with other people and eventually hiring teams and so on. And this is a struggle that many entrepreneurs experience, because you're used to doing everything yourself. You're used to working in this solo mode. And then the easiest thing, and also the thing that we're usually shown as a model, is you tell other people what to do. So it's like you use other people like tools, So you need to do this following this, this procedure, and you have to do a good job. Otherwise, I'm going to be mad at you and you get fired and stuff like that, But if and I think you can build probably a fairly large organization working like that. It's like you just have everyone do the thing that you've assigned them to do. But if you really want to create something that's more excellent, then you have to, at some point, empower people. You have to empower people. And, at the very least, you have to empower like your management team to do their thing, to keep everyone else in line, basically. And ideally, you empower everyone. You empower everyone to do their best work. And from a founder entrepreneur perspective, eventually you want to empower everyone to the point where they don't need you anymore. And that can be pretty hard to do, because we like to feel needed and stuff, right?
Yeah.
But really, to me, that's like the ultimate success of building a business up, is you build it up to the point where this business doesn't need you anymore. Where, if I get hit by a bus today, everything just keeps going. Everything's fine,
Mm-hmm.
That is kind of a successful, like at that point, you've built a business, and you haven't just like created a job for yourself and gotten some other people involved,
I think that could be a really good sort of litmus test to see if you're empowering people or you're creating this kind of caretaker dynamic.
Yeah.
And my personal experience with this is through personal training, actually. I mean, doing this podcast, I've seen so many parallels with what we're talking about and so many points of reference. That's pretty cool. But when I trained clients, it became clear to me that a client that, say, they were with me for 6 months, I knew that I would have I knew that I did a good job if after 6 months they did not need me anymore.
Yeah.
If after a year they were still like, oh, what should I do? It's like, I've somehow dropped the ball there because I've not empowered them, because they still need me, or they feel like they need me, or they don't feel confident doing this on their own. So the same thing could be applied to a business, I guess. It's like, if I've got 20 people in the business and they're all like, oh, Shane, help, what do we do? It's like, okay, guys, I've been working with you for like a year now.
Yeah.
Then that's kind of
it's not a good sign, yeah.
But one thing I wanted to ask is, what do you mean? I know it seems pretty obvious, and I kind of have a rough idea in my mind, but what do you mean when you say empower people?
Mm-hmm. So you want to give people the ability to, you want to give people the ability and the circumstance to do their best. So if you think about, and let's start with, let's say, a simple example. Let's say we hire a designer, and so this person they are hired in part because of a skill set they have of doing design work. And so then the question is, under what circumstances does this person do the very best design work they can do? And in a way, the way I think of this is almost like I think about my personal development, but then projected onto another person. So I know that the work that I do, right? And again, we can use an inversion. We've talked about this before as a mental model. We can use an inversion for this to think about this. If I were hired for, I don't know, let's say doing marketing work, I can imagine circumstances under which you would get very little value out of me. So if you were to say, okay, you're doing marketing work here, but here's how it works. You have to follow these procedures. Everything has to be standardized. If you have an idea, you have to fill out these forms and ask for approval, and it usually takes 2 weeks before they get back to you. And most of the workday is like long drawn out meetings where just everybody has to be in these meetings, even though most of the time we're talking about stuff that doesn't apply to you. And you're expected to answer every email within seconds, and you're constantly getting messages and so on, right? That's the work environment, and those are the work requirements. But your task is do marketing so that we get more sales. What would I do here, right? Like, you could hire me under these circumstances in a company like that with this kind of, micromanaging control and these circumstances. Maybe I couldn't make any difference to this business, So clearly there's a set of circumstances under which the value I was hired for would just disappear. And on the other hand, there's a set of circumstances, like if you give me the right amount of creative freedom, and you make it like easy for me to do my best work, and you give me space and time to do my best work, and you give me clear guidelines of what's expected, you give me the resources I need and so on, that is more a circumstance where you would start getting the best out of me and where I can make a real difference to that business's bottom line. And so that's how I think about anyone who works for me, right? There are circumstances under which they will do their best work. And those circumstances are not the same for everyone. So for me, basically I need loads and loads of freedom. If you just tell me, make more money for this business, and you say nothing else and you just let me do my thing, that's basically where you get the best of me. For other people, they need more guidance. They maybe need more of a social aspect, whatever, right? So one of the goals is to discover what is that? What does this person need to unfold their full potential? And to even go beyond that, where it's like, how can I help this person kind of do better than they even realized they could? How can I encourage this person to further their learning and their skill building? And how can I kind of fan the flames of this person's skill and creativity? And that's what I try to create. And that's what I think of as like empowering someone to do their best, but also empowering someone by leveling them up, by helping them level up and do better.
Got you. And that answer you gave is obviously influenced and painted quite heavily by your experience as an entrepreneur and working with teams and managing teams and stuff. But I'm sure you must have something for this, but I'm just thinking how a person who is not a part of a team, how can they empower the growth of other people and find more virtue and meaning in doing so?
Yeah.
And something came up for me was this is like an idea that I've shared with you previously that you really loved, actually, is the idea of complimenting people behind their back.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is, I don't know whether it falls into the category of empowering the growth of other people, but it does seem to diminish a hell of a lot of that self-concern. Because when you're self-concern is essentially just ego.
Yeah.
And ego kind of locks you in this self-created, mind-created prison where you see people suspiciously, and you see everything as a competition of which you've got to win. So in order to win, you've got to drag other people down, and the thing is, it doesn't even make you feel good. So the ego will tell you this is all very necessary. Go on, that person, I want that person to have less so we can have more, etc. We need to win the game. But the process of doing this just makes you absolutely miserable. Now, one of the most easiest ways, and it just a kind of a thing that I've made a habit, is to just compliment people behind the back. There's nothing in it for the ego. There's nothing in it for you. It's like no one, that person isn't going to be like, oh, thank you very much, and you get the validation from the thank you. You're saying, I'm complimenting this person behind their back. They'll never know.
I think it's genius. Yeah, I think that's genius because it is like, it's very indirectly, I think, empowering someone, because what you're kind of doing is it's very subtle social engineering in favor of that person. And I think it's certainly uplifting in some ways. So yeah, I think that is actually good. It's a good example. Very practical. Like, do that. That's a cool example. Another thing I want to say, and this is also something we've talked about on the team before, is just be supportive. Just show up in someone's life as someone who basically says, listen, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to take an interest in you. I'm going to listen to what you have to say. And I'm simply going to have your back. If you say, hey, I want to learn skateboarding, I'm like, cool, that's awesome. And just that, I'm just going to be there for you. And basically, and obviously, if there's something specific I can help with, if you're like, oh, my skateboard broke, and I'm like, oh, I have an old skateboard that I'm not using. Here you go. That's like active support. But even just being like, yeah, I think it's great that you want to learn skateboarding. Awesome. Tell me more about it, right? You can have such a big impact on people by just being in their corner by default. Just being like, look, whatever you're into, like I'm just here to support your growth and your path, whatever form that takes. And that's just my attitude. And even if there's nothing, like I can't teach you skateboarding. There's nothing I can do specifically here. But if I'm just like, yes, I'm in favor of this. I think this is great. If you want to talk about it, let's talk about skateboarding. That's it. That is empowering of other people.
You're a man of many talents, Shane. I mean, who knows? You could just whip out, oh, by the way, I skateboard.
Skateboard, I don't know. Not going to be a skateboard tricks compilation with me in it anytime soon.
God damn it. But another thing, just I wanted to say on the empowering the growth of other people, because it relates more to the second point than just to the third one. And it relates quite well to virtue and meaning. So I shared with you recently how there's this part of me, and this is like a personal example, and I'm sure that a few people can relate to this as well. There's like a part of me, and I don't know where this came from, but there's a part of me that can feel quite inadequate in certain situations. I won't go into specifics, but this is fine. Can feel quite inadequate in certain situations, and the impulse is for me to drag people down, and I can feel it come up. And I'm glad I'm really self-aware about this stuff, because it means that I can choose another alternative. Because if I wasn't aware of it, then I would just act straight away, and then probably not notice it, and then justify it later when it comes to a head and all this stuff. But there is a part of me that wants that when it comes up, the egoic part of me that thinks that it needs, in order to protect itself, in order to feel adequate, it needs to do that by dragging other people down. Now, one thing I've clocked onto recently, I've become really aware of, is the value in doing the precise opposite of that. And how this helps me feel connected to the world and to people, which in the topic of virtue and meaning seems to provide my life with more virtue and meaning than anything else. When I can see within myself that there is a very real animalistic primal impulse to compete and to drag other people down and to just be aggressive and just shove everyone away and just this and that. And I can observe that, absorb it, and choose to do the precise opposite in favor of the greater good, in favor of love, in favor of being like helpful to other people. I feel straight up connected to everyone else. And this, it really does provide me with virtue and meaning in that way. And I think that's partly because it kind of diminishes this self-concern. And I'm really glad you put freedom from self-concern down there. So yeah, maybe this relates.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a great, well, in your case, it's very much about empowering other people, because it's like the little devil on your shoulder says, don't do that, do the opposite. I think it's also actually an interesting thing, like for anyone who has rebellious tendencies, that if you have this voice in your head that says, oh, do the thing, you can be like, how about no? I'm going to do the opposite of what you say. What now?
How about that?
Yeah. And I think that like certain people, like I'm one of those, I have super strong rebellious tendencies. So for me, it's much easier to rebel against something than to comply with something, And it's actually that you can use that like as a personal growth tool, like rebel against the suggestions that the voice in your head makes. Or at least that one, the little gnome in your head anyway.
The little gnome. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good metaphor. Is that we all have that, like a little devil or a little gnome or whatever mythical creature that's just telling us, goblin or something or whatever, or I don't know. I was trying to think of a really obscure Greek mythological one, but I can't at the moment. Damn.
We'll fix it in post.
We'll fix it in post. Just insert it. Yeah. But yeah, no, I've lost the thread.
Never mind.
Carry on.
So we've talked about some examples now, like empowering others, right? And I think you can do this as like a teacher, a mentor, a coach. You can do this as just a supportive friend. You can also do it as like a patron of someone. It's like you can basically be an enabler, but in the sense of you enable someone's growth, you enable someone's good habits, And I think there's just loads of ways in which you can do this. And even like charitable work and donations and things belong in this category. That's one of the things, if you increase your financial power, you can say, I'm going to give a bunch of money to these people over here who are doing something that I think is great. It's like, I'm not going to be doing that. I'm not going to be spending my time fixing this problem in the world, but I'm empowering you guys with my money, So that is empowering others. So let's get to the third point, which is in a way the most obvious one, which is, have a greater mission in life, like work on something that is clearly outside yourself. And that is often the thing that the purpose kind of comes down to. It's like, what are you doing, like you said before, that is not just for you? And a good question to ask here, so this is kind of the practical how you can explore this, is there's a two-part question here. The first part you may be familiar with already, which is like, what would you do if you just overnight got like $1 billion, no strings attached, right? So you basically have unlimited money pretty much. You have an amount of money that you can never spend. Anything you've ever wanted, you can buy now, and you never have to work a day in your life again. So what would you do? And you can think of what are like some of the first things you would do with this. And you can also think of like, maybe you'd be like, okay, I'm just going to take a vacation. I'm going to chill on a beach somewhere. What would you do like after a few weeks or months of that? So once you've done the thing, you got it out of your system, basically, it's like, okay, what now? What would you do? And the things that seem important to you to do, even when, money is just no concern anymore at all, are usually connected to something that is meaningful to you on a deeper level, right? And then, so that's a useful exercise to do. Yeah, what would you do if you got $1 billion overnight, no strings attached? How would your life look like in the next few weeks and then maybe a year from now? Then the second part of this question, which you can use to dig even deeper, is like, what if you got $1 billion, but you also got everything else that you want? So you got the admiration of your peers. Your dad tells you that he's proud of you. You got the woman of your dreams or the partner of your dreams. You published the best-selling book. It's already happened. You don't even have to write it anymore. It's already happened. Everyone's, oh my God, you're so good. You won the Oscar. Whatever. Everything that you want, everything, internal, external, emotional, material, everything you already have immediately. Mm-hmm. It's kind of an interesting, the genie curses you by giving you absolutely everything you could have ever wished for. What now? And this is in many ways a more difficult question to answer. Mm-hmm. But this is, if you really want to dig deep and figure out what purpose could I align myself with, this is the question to ask.
Yeah, I'm thinking now. As far as I can tell, this is a pretty damn fundamental question. Do you have an answer to that, Shane?
So the short answer is yes, that I would do the things that are, it's again like about being process oriented and doing the things that you do even if there's no reward and even if there's nothing else. And of course, so for example, for me, I really like teaching and I really like, creating interesting, like intense growth experiences for people. And of course you could, depending on how you want to formulate this question, you could somehow try to make, well, that's already happened somehow too. But it's like, well, it doesn't matter. I want to do another one, Mm-hmm. Like, okay, you've already created the amazing, super intense workshop for people, and it's been a huge success. Okay, I want to do another one. Because the reason I want to do this is not to say I've done it or to make money or something. I want to do the thing,
It's part of an ongoing mission.
Yeah. And so it's essentially like, it's like you can say, well, what would you do? Well, I would eat a pizza. And then, but you've already eaten the pizza. Yeah, I'll have another one. You know what I mean? So that is kind of essentially that's the loophole, whereas it doesn't matter. Even if I've had loads of pizzas, I'm going to have another one,
You know your audience. You know you're talking to. you knew that example would resonate with me. Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I'm thinking right now, it's like because for this apprenticeship that you ran with us, you kind of asked something similar on the intake form, and for some reason, male suicide prevention came up for me.
Right. Yeah.
I asked myself that question. I was like, damn. But if that was all taken care of, what would that be? And it's like something to do with male suicide prevention.
Yeah.
And I often thought to myself, and I still do, it's still part of my overall mission actually, is to see at what point I can intervene on this track. Mm-hmm. There's like I won't go off topic, but yeah, it was that. And it's right now the question would, if I answer the question honestly, it's like I would, if I had a billion or multiple billion, I would run free like really kick-ass free retreats for men, like the best retreats you have ever seen. The kind of retreats that people would pay like $3,000 for a weekend, and then I'd be like, "Hey, it's okay. You're 21. You clearly can't afford this. Just come along anyway.
Yeah.
Like, don't worry, I'm a billionaire. Don't you worry about money. I'll worry about the money. Come along, have a good time.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that also like the short answer to this question is I would do everything that we're planning to do with Icario, but probably for free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Precisely.
So, And yeah, another kind of thing to think about here on this topic of having a greater mission, something I also invite everyone to think about is something we talked about in the social episode on kind of starting to build a tribe and bringing people together, like inviting people into an experience that you want to have, whatever that experience is, right? You want to have people to have long conversations with, you want to have people to talk about books with, you want to have people to play video games with or whatever. You start building that tribe. And a next level thing is like start leading that tribe. Start like taking responsibility for trying to create the best possible experience and like building a strong tribe essentially. And also you can then start, including people in the tribe who need to be part of the tribe, even if they're not necessarily the people, because initially you select the people you want to hang out with, right? And as your personal power grows, as you develop, you can get into the situation where it's like, look, you're going to be part of or I'm going to invite you into my tribe, not because I want to spend time with you because that's good for me, but because I think you need this. I think that this is good for you. And maybe it's a bit difficult for me initially, right? To deal with, maybe you have some issues or whatever. Maybe initially it's difficult for me. And essentially, if it's just from a hedonic perspective, it's like, well, this is less fun now, for a while. But I'm inviting you in here because I think that's good for you and because I want to raise you up. And that is something I think also that very specifically we can do that is really far removed from, like, you don't need $1 billion to do that. You don't need much to do that. You can start building a tribe and you can start working on empowering and uplifting that tribe and then expanding that tribe. And that is something that's outside you. That's something that is very much a purpose that gives you something to work on that you do for the sake of doing it and not for some egoic reason.
Yeah. And it's cool that you place such an emphasis on tribe building and things that are beyond you. And I wonder if you had this, if you had a billion, I wonder if people really ask themselves, if I had $1 billion, what would I do?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, I'm thinking like 95%, people really soul searched of people would be like, I'd do something, the thing that they would choose to do would involve other people in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no matter what, no matter how rich you are, you'll naturally gravitate towards that. Even if right now you're just treading water in your own life and you're trying your best just to put out your own fires and stuff.
Yeah.
If all of that was relieved and you didn't have to worry about that, as a default, you'd want to bring people together, I would say.
Yeah.
And the people that don't do that. Now, there's a great movie, and Jonas is going to absolutely love this. Jonas, the camera guy, is a film nut. There's a movie called There Will Be Blood with Daniel Day-Lewis in it. Now, if you've not seen this movie, watch this movie, because this is a story of basically a guy who achieves material wealth and billions through oil companies, but while dragging everyone else around him down and doing the precise opposite of tribe building. And not to provide any spoilers, but basically he is just this miserable billionaire who can't trust anyone. He is an absolute miserable guy who has billions of dollars, but he just doesn't. He can't connect to anyone. His family have disowned him and stuff. Minor spoiler, but that's a thing that came to mind. I'm thinking, yeah, if you had billions, you'd probably invest it in helping other people and building a tribe.
Oh yeah, or even just doing something with other. It's like, unless it's shared, it's kind of pointless. And that's maybe a good way to tie this whole thing off, right? The entire idea of virtue and meaning and talking about this that's the example of what you don't want to do. You don't want to become that guy, right? Where it's like, yeah, there's great success, everything you've done, you've been successful at, but you're miserable. You hate yourself and so on, right? So it's like, it's thinking about these things of the topics of virtue and meaning or what can steer you away from that and towards a much more positive development. I think that's why it's important. So with that, those are the 6 pillars of getting your shit together. And we've covered that. And of course, we'd love to hear feedback. We'd love to hear any questions you have, anything that you want to have us dive in further. But also in the next episode, we're going to talk about, there's basically going to be one more, it's like a how to get your shit together bonus episode, because it's the one thing that is a pretty serious problem. It is possible that even if we have just managed to give like the best advice in the world, this is all pointless. And the one thing we have to cover, the one thing we have to talk about to make sure that this isn't pointless is what we'll talk about in the next episode.
Oh, a cliffhanger. Did you hear that? You hear that? That was a pro cliffhanger right there. We're in
Tune in next week to see if Batman survives.
Don't even finish your sentence.
Yeah.
Just cut the sentence off halfway. They're like, what's the next one?
Yeah.
All
right. And as usual, Icario.com, the URL for the show notes for this one are Icario.com/007. And you can subscribe on YouTube and on iTunes and whatever you use to listen to podcasts. Also, wait, it's called Apple Podcasts now. Review the podcast on Apple Podcasts and say nice things about us to us.
And subscribe via carrier pigeon.
Yes. This option is coming soon. All right.
That's it.
See you in the next one.
Take care. Thank you.